Okay, our next topic now is the system level privileges. We have discussed about the object level privileges. Object level privileges are related to specific objects, tables, views, procedures, functions and all that stuff. And now we are going to talk about the system level privileges. Now what are these system level privileges? Okay, let us say a system level privilege is, we haven't seen the database creation and all that stuff. Okay, let us talk about create procedure, create table. These are system level privileges. As you can see, I don't have a name of any object over there. So how do I assign, how do I grant this privilege? These two words itself is a privilege. Two words to club together is a privilege. So I say grant create table to Shekhar and a semicolon. As you can see, this is a privilege and this is the user. There is no object here in the middle. And that's why this is called as a system level privilege, not the object level privilege. No object is involved. So create table, create procedure, create view, drop table, drop, all those things are actually system level privileges. Okay, now there are certain other privileges that we probably have not seen here, but I will write them down. Those are alter database, alter system. We will be executing these two commands very frequently. Alter database and alter system commands will be executing them frequently, and to be able to execute these commands frequently, we need those special privileges. So these are also system level privileges. I have one number here. I don't know how accurate that number is in 11G, but around 170 different object level privileges, sorry, not object, the system level privileges are there in Oracle 10G. So where do you find out all the object level privileges? There is a data dictionary view for that. And the name of that data dictionary view is system privilege map. System underscore privilege underscore map. That is the name of the view. If you go and do a select star from this view, you will see all different types of system level privileges that can be granted to any other user. That can be granted to any other user. System privilege map. So let me also write certain other system level privileges. As I said, database. We are going to learn one command as create database. So create database, and then we are going to learn a command alter database. So database, create and alter. Then we are going to execute a command system. So alter system, as I just mentioned, STM. Then there is a create table space. So create and alter mostly. Create table space. We know now what a table space is. So create table space, drop table space. These are certain system level privileges that are there. Then again, create any object, create sequences, create synonyms, create view, create procedure, create function. All these are different types of system level privileges. So people will ask you, many times, so, drop table B, or they will ask you this question. I have a table called as A. I would like to drop that table. What privilege do I need? Do I need a system level privilege or the object level privilege? The answer is the system level privilege. Okay, even though I am dropping an object now, the privilege that I require is a system level privilege. So these are all different types of system level privileges, and these are given to only few users who will need those kind of privileges. Not all users will be given system level privileges. So let us say you have started a new project, and there are around 10 different developers in that project. All those developers are going to do programming. They are going to create tables, procedures, functions, and let us say these things: tables, views, functions, procedures, triggers, and synonyms only, okay, and sequences. So these are the objects that a typical developer will kind of create for his own programming purposes and all that stuff. So there are 10 developers, and therefore you are responsible for giving these privileges to the 10 developers. So obviously what do? You first create these users. Obviously you need to have the authority, you need to have the privilege to create a user. So assuming that you are a user called as Shekhar, and you have all the privileges to do these things. So first thing, you will type the create user command 10 times because of 10 users. Now after that, what will you do? You will say those users are, let us say, U1, U2, U3, U4, all the way to U10. These are the users that you have created so far. After that, I said that all of these users should be able to create and alter and drop all these objects. So you are going to say what? Grant. So you are going to say grant create table to U1, correct? Then you are going to say grant create table to U2, grant create table to U3. So likewise you are going to execute this command 10 times for 10 users. Then you are going to come to views. Then you are going to say grant create view to U1, then grant create view to U2. So likewise, how many commands would you execute? Let us say these are 10 and these are also 10. So 10 multiplied 10, you will have to execute the grant command 100 times. And there is no other alternative to this than executing it 100 times, unless and until you grant it to public. That will be everybody. फिर से ठंडा हो गया एकदम. Temperature control is not so great, क्या? Anyway, so just keep it in your hand. So what my point here is there any easier way to do this thing? And yes, the answer is roles. Answer is roles. So what do? We create a certain entity, a certain concept, whatever you want to call it, as a role. And role has a specific name, let us say R1. So to make my job of typing easier, so that I make few mistakes, what do? I actually create one role by typing a command create role R1. This is the only command that I type, create role R1. And after I type this command, a role is created. What do you mean by a role creation? It is just an entity, and the purpose of the role is now like this. This one acts as a kind of a user, and it acts as a privilege. So let me explain what I mean by that. After a role is created, I can come and say grant create table. I will just change it here. I will say grant create table to R1. This is not a user. This is a role. So grant create table to R1. So after that, what will happen to R1? R1 is not a user. You cannot log in as R1. R1 is a role. It has nothing to do with a user. But because of this, what happens now? I can say now grant, after this thing, I can say grant R1 to U1. Look at this. This is not a privilege now. Okay, this is not a privilege, this is a role. So I am granting a role to a user. So here I am granting a privilege to a role. So now a privilege has been granted to a role, and a role has been granted to a user. Because of this, the privilege gets automatically granted to a user. It's like an associative property. So what I will do, to save my typing, I'm going to say grant create table to R1, grant create view to R1, grant create function to R1. So likewise, I will execute this command 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And then I will say grant R1 to U1, grant R1 to U2, and likewise I have done this thing, and now I have saved my typing. Because of this, once I granted R1 to U10, all these privileges will be suddenly granted to U10. Only The reason for the existence of role is to save the typing and therefore to save mistakes and to make my administration easier. If tomorrow user 3 leaves the organization, I will say revoke R1 from U3. Revoke R1 from U3. So R1 will act as a privilege when we are granting it, and we are granting it to, it will act as a user. That is what I meant by sometimes it will act as a user, sometimes it will act as a role. That is what the concept of a role is.
When you first grant those create table to R1, after that R1 is just a role. You said that sometimes it uses.
No, it is role. I mean, just for our understanding, I said that R1 is a role. So role is something to which the privileges are granted, and role is something which is granted to other users. Let me repeat thing. Role is something to which the privileges are granted, and role is something which is granted to the users.
Means it's just like a script is having many.
This is what the correct understanding is. Yeah, you are correct. Now, what kind of privileges can be granted to a role? Anything. Object privileges, system privileges. Anything can be granted to a role, and role is granted to the role can be granted to user. Role can be granted to another role. Role can also be granted to another role.
Is it possible to grant all these, system privileges at once in R1?
Yes. No, at once. No, not at once. So you have to actually execute these commands, 10 commands at least, then it will go. But Oracle has, that's a very good question. I was coming to that question. Oracle has done certain work for us. Oracle has created one role whose name is DBA. DBA is the name of the role. And to this role, Oracle has already granted all the system privileges. All the system privileges that exist, those 170 or whatever. Whatever those are granted to the DBA. And therefore, if I say grant DBA to U1, then suddenly what happens? U1 becomes a very powerful user because he has all the system privileges granted to him. All the system privileges granted to him. And because of that, he can create users. So obviously one of the thing would be create user, create table space, drop table space. All those special privileges are granted to the DBA role, and therefore DBA role is a very powerful role. When we do a system audit in any organization, the very first thing that they try to find out, the list of users who have been granted a DBA role. And if you have in your organization only 4 DBAs and there are 25 users who have been granted a DBA privilege, then you are not managing your security properly. You are unnecessarily giving privileges to people who don't require it. So audit people will come and first they will ask you, okay, give me the names of all the 4 DBAs that you have. Only those should have the DBA role. Everybody else should be revoked. So you will say now, revoke DBA from some other user. So DBA is a role already created by the Oracle. Oracle has also created certain other roles, and one of them is connect. Connect is a role which has a privilege, system level privilege called as a create session. Okay, very important privilege that has been granted to the connect role. And then you grant connect role to any other user, and because of the create session, the user is able to log in. So just because you have created a user with the create user command, that doesn't mean that user can log in. Even if he knows his password, he will not be able to log in unless and until a create session privilege is granted to that user, either through a role or directly. Somehow the create session privilege has to be granted to a user, then only user can log in. Until unless that can. So suddenly, let me ask you something. If a user leaves organization, or somebody is creating some problems in your database, you may want to just revoke his create session privilege. All other privileges will be intact. You will just revoke his create session privilege. He will not be able to even log in. Or another thing that you can do is you can lock his account. So we'll see how to lock an account, how to unlock an account, or you can revoke this create session privilege. So connect is a role that you should remember. DBA is a role that you should remember, and then there is a third role that we should remember is a resource. Resource is also a role that Oracle has created for us, and these kind of important privileges that are required for mostly developers. Table creation, view creation, all these privileges which are usually required by the developer are granted to the resource role, and then the resource role is granted to a user. So these are certain things that we should probably remember: the connect, the DBA, and the resource. So now, to summarize this thing, what is a system level privilege? A privilege that is granted to a user without any object in the middle. That is a system level privilege. Hold on just for a second. So that is a system level privilege, and then that system level privilege can be granted to a role. An object level privilege can also be granted to a role, and the roles are granted to users. Roles are granted to other roles, and roles can be revoked from users. Role can be revoked from the roles and users also. So that is what our role discussion was, and the system privilege discussion was. So we will kind of